Sun Tzu said that the victorious army only enters battle after having first won the victory. But how do you enter or how do you win a battle before it's even fought? Hi, I'm John LeMay and welcome to my basement war room. Today, I'm diving into Chapter 4 of Sun Tzu, Strategic Positions. And I'm going to explore that chapter, then relate it to U.S. Army Doctrine, and then give some examples from, or an example from Afghanistan on how you can win before you fight. So, let's jump right into Chapter 4. The theme of Chapter 4 is winning before you fight. Sun Tzu said, the expert in battle would first make himself invincible and then wait for the enemy to expose his vulnerability. That's from the Ames translation. As an aside, that sort of makes me think about the Taliban withdrawing to Pakistan, establishing themselves in a safe haven there, so they made themselves invincible. Okay, Sun Tzu also said his victories in battle are unerring. Unerring means that he acts where victory is certain and conquers an enemy that has already lost. The victorious army only enters battle after having first won the victory, while the defeated army only seeks victory after having first entered the fray. So Sun Tzu's theme here is clearly winning before you fight. He does prescribe some steps on how to do this. So now let's look at those in context of U.S. Army Doctrine. Before I jump into Sun Tzu's steps, though, I want to talk a little bit about what level of war are we at. Ames translates this chapter as strategic positions. Griffith translates it as simply dispositions, and Giles translates it as tactical dispositions. Because Sun Tzu is clearly writing about fighting battles, I really believe he's talking about tactics, not operational art, which links tactical actions to strategy, or strategy itself. So we're really talking about tactics here. And so tactically, Sun Tzu says, to win before you fight, you need to have a measurement of space. He's talking about terrain, estimation of quantities, logistics, calculations, comparisons, chances of victory. So he has a sort of 5-step process that you go through, each building on the other to ensure that you win before you fight. This really reminds me of U.S. Army Doctrine. It sort of rhymes with combat power. So the Army says combat power is leadership, information, plus the 6 warfighting functions, which are mission, command, movement, maneuver, intelligence, fires, sustainment, and protection. So sort of the parallel here is by going through these 8 items and synchronizing them all, preparing them all before the battle, you win, you develop your combat power, and win the battle before you fight. Just as if you go through Sun Tzu's 5 steps here, you win before you fight. Now that really, though, as we dive into this, makes me think about tactics. What are tactics? And the Army has a definition, but it is very 19th century, or maybe even from antiquity. The Greek for tactics means a position, arrangement, and so the Army's definition is employment, ordered arrangement, and directed actions of forces in relation to each other. Again, makes a lot of sense in antiquity, or makes a lot of sense in the 19th century when we're really talking about the ordered arrangement of artillery, infantry, and cavalry on a battlefield. But today, there's a lot more going on. Really, even when we're fighting at platoon company level, it's typically a joint fight. And it's often those echelons, the company commander, that's calling in joint forces, synchronizing joint forces with the battle. So it's not just combined arms, the various arms of the Army, but actually all the services fighting together at that tactical level. So this definition, I think, is a little bit lacking. Instead, I propose application of combat power in time, space, and purpose to accomplish a task. And so when we're talking application of combat power, again, combat power is all these 8 elements. So the application of all those 8 elements in time, space, and purpose to accomplish a task. Another advantage of this definition is if we look at stability operations and take a task such as having a key leader engagement, a meeting with the Afghan village elder, well, just the ordered arrangement of forces becomes very lacking then. But synchronizing mission command, intelligence, sustainment protection really does speak to how you accomplish the task of meeting with an Afghan village elder, and that is absolutely tactics. Doing stability operations is definitely tactics when conducted by companies, platoons, etc. Okay, so to draw this out a little bit more, let's look at an example from the Afghan War. Okay, so here's my example. This isn't a specific something that happened, but it rhymes. Certainly built from my personal knowledge on tours in Afghanistan. So it rhymes with stuff that happened in Afghanistan. Okay, so let me orient you to the map here, the terrain. And it's the same illustration twice. The first one I'm going to show not winning the fight before it happens, and the second how the fight is won before it happens. Okay, so here in the west is a combat outpost. It's out in the valley. This green is sort of the grass and whatnot of the valley, and there's 3 roads that intersect that this combat outpost is sort of overwatching this connection. And then to the east, going up into the mountains, so these are mountains on the north, east, and south of this road, is a village. And so this road goes up into mountains and ends in this village here. Okay, and so a platoon is ordered to go up into the village in the mountains and to conduct a key leader engagement, a meeting, say, with the village elders, and to patrol the village and talk to the locals and get a sense like how the insurgency is going. And so the platoon goes out to conduct its key leader engagement. So the platoon goes out, hangs out at the village, does its mission for a few hours, and it comes back. When it comes back, it encounters an IED, and what happened, of course, is since there's only one way in and out of this village for armored vehicles, while the platoon was spending a few hours in the village, the insurgents came in and placed an IED on the only way that platoon could go from the village back to their combat outpost. And so the platoon encounters an IED, and that's almost certainly a day that's going into the loss column. There's almost never an enemy to actually fight. There's no one that they can observe and return fire on. Best case scenario, they identify it or somehow miss it, but probably not. And if the vehicle absorbs the blast and saves the soldiers, that's great. But they're probably going to lose equipment and maybe soldiers in that encounter. So that battle is lost. Now, let's take a look at the same scenario. So, same scenario exactly, same mission. This platoon is going to go up and conduct a key leader engagement in the village. But they are going to synchronize the warfighting functions in advance. And so they're going to coordinate with higher headquarters and have a couple sniper teams infiltrate in through the mountains and overwatch part of the road. They're also going to, after the platoon goes out to the village, have some close air support, and this won't be close, it'll be operating high above, but come on station overwatching the road that they came in on, and it'll be, as I said, high up in the clouds, so they cannot be observed from the ground, but they of course have pretty advanced sensors and they can definitely see what's going down there on the road. And so those airplanes are then watching that while the platoons is doing its thing in the village, having its key leader engagement. Some insurgents come out to implant an IED, but instead this time a sniper shoots them or the airplanes drop a bomb on them. So the insurgents are killed while they're trying to implant this IED. The platoon then returns from its mission. It exploits the dead enemy insurgents and their weapons and bomb-making materials and all that kind of stuff, places all that up, and then returns to the combat outpost. So, this day is going into the victory column. It's a win. And it was won because all the elements of combat power were applied, synchronized and applied in time, space, and purpose in order to accomplish the task of going to conduct that KLE at the village. And that really is what Sun Tzu's talking about when he says, hey, you win the battle before you fight it. Okay, so we talked about chapter 4 of Sun Tzu, how it rhymes with U.S. Army doctrine, and then I gave this example. Now let me conclude with a couple references. Okay, so from my references, the first one is, of course, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. This right here is the Giles translation. I also looked at the Griffith and at the Ames translation. On the board was Ames translation, which is my primary reference. Here is Tactics by Friedman. This is a good read as I sort of thought through my own definition of tactics there. Friedman has a good theoretical model of how you actually use tactics. And Friedman's a Sun Tzu fan, for lack of a better word. I just want to briefly quote from chapter 15 here. Friedman writes, "For ground operations, Sun Tzu's chapters on types of terrain, written centuries ago, almost cannot be improved on." That's Friedman on Sun Tzu. Then, of course, FM 390 Tactics. So this has been updated. This is an old version, and what I primarily used was Army Doctrine Reference, ADP 390 Offense and Defense, which covers the same material. It's really tactics. Well, thank you for joining me today. If this has been valuable to you, I encourage you join the Facebook group Lessons of the Afghanistan and Iraq Wars. I think the group is probably a better forum for conversation. I really would like to hear what you have learned from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So a better forum for conversation, but it also gives me some additional tools. I made it as a social learning group, and that lets me post, upload files and post documents. So the lecture notes, or my notes from developing this lecture, will be posted there. I can't post them on my regular Facebook page, but I can post them in that group. So the notes from all these lectures are available to you on that group. So please join it. Also, if you'd like to go a little bit deeper behind the scenes and of the Basement War Room, sign up for the newsletter on thebasementwarroom.com. I'll send out a newsletter at the end of each month, and that will just give you a deeper view or a different perspective on what I'm doing here in the War Room. Again, thank you very much for joining me today.